Well, let's go ahead and get started, and folks can just kind of hop on as we're going through. Before we begin, I'd like to just go over a few quick housekeeping items. The first of which, this program is being recorded and we'll send it out to all program attendees in the next coming week. Please remember to keep yourself on mute unless you are called upon to speak, and feel free throughout the presentation, just go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A and we'll make sure to get to as many as possible at the end during the Q&A portion of the program. Thanks for being here and happy Friday, everyone. Welcome again, and thanks for joining us today. This is the first program of our 2022 LunchVox series sponsored by US Bank. We're incredibly lucky to have organizations such as US Bank sponsor these programs and see value in them, and just for their continued support of the Chamber's mission. So please join me in giving a warm welcome. We like to do that by giving snaps to Reed Jaksick, who's the market president for US Bank. He's here on the program today, and I will hand it over to him to say a few words.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Danny, and thank you everyone at the Springfield Chamber. Certainly, we're proud to participate and serve as a title sponsor for the LunchVox live series. I think anytime we can get kind of involved with, where there's an organization focusing on high priority issues that are dealing with real-time relevance in our business community and how folks are successful in navigating through that and sharing best practices, it's a no-brainer to get involved in it, and just appreciate everything that you and the Chamber have done around that. And so certainly I know my organization, as well as everybody on the call today, and some that haven't been able to join us even, are dealing with the competitive landscape in the labor force, but also a changing landscape in the labor force as new generations are coming in and prior generations are exiting. It's creating a really dynamic environment. And so really excited for the content we have today. Certainly, how do we do business? How do we change how we're doing business? How do we change how we're recruiting? And really excited to hear from some awesome organizations in the Springfield community with Ninewood, Chambers Construction in Oakmont. I'm really excited to see and hear kind of how they're doing things a little differently and how they've adjusted their strategies to succeed in this environment. So again, really thankful to be part of this opportunity, and just appreciate everything that you guys are doing over at Springfield Chamber.
Thank you, Reed. We appreciate everything that you and US Bank are doing as well, and for your sponsorship of this LunchVox series. So to get started, during today's program, we'll take a deeper look at how next-gen professionals are managing, leading, and driving change in their organizations. Because although it may seem that millennials entering the workforce is merely on the horizon, but the reality of it is that the millennial generation has been integrated into our workforce for quite some time now. So I'd like to introduce our presenter and facilitator for today's program, a millennial himself, Henry Fields. Henry is the workforce analyst serving Lane and Douglas counties with the Oregon Employment Department, where he provides data to improve business decisions across the region. Raised in Coos Bay, he earned a BA from the University of Oregon and a graduate degree in public administration from Indiana University. Please give another warm welcome to Henry. And Henry, the floor is yours.
Thank you all so much. And thank you, Danny. Thanks everybody for being here. Happy Friday. I'm excited to talk about this important topic. So I'm going to share a little bit of a presentation to kind of set the table for us and talk about what do millennials look like in the workforce. Reed really said it best just a moment ago. It is a time of transition. It's a time for business leaders to be thinking about what their workplace looks like. And I'm going to kind of share a little bit of the economic data that helps underlie that. So we'll start with the presentation, then I'll go ahead and introduce our panel to talk about the important things going on in our community. So let me be upfront first of all. So Danny shared my most important bias. I am myself a millennial, so do take that into account as you're looking at some of my data when I talk about how much we've been maligned over the years. No, but really, one thing that I do want to say is people differ in their perspective on how different the millennial generation is from other generations. What I would say is my own personal bias is that a lot of the things that are important to this generation were important to younger workers when from other generations when they were entering the workforce. So that's not to say there's nothing unique about this generation, but I think a lot of these are best practices that will continue to serve us well with generations to come, for example. So I'm Henry Fields. I serve Lane and Douglas counties with employment and wage information. What that basically means, if you haven't worked with me before, is if there is data that you want to get your hands on that revolves around the economy, I'm a great person for you to know and reach out to. I'm an ombudsman for what you need to find. So let's go into a little bit about what millennials look like in our area. A note, all my backgrounds today are taken from the photo service that we use. I just searched the word millennial and put the pictures on the back. So we're gonna see a lot of stereotypes come up on what millennials look like, for example. So let's get right into it. First of all, who are millennials? There's not a strict definition, but basically we're talking about folks born between 1981 and 1996. I hilariously heard somebody refer to the year of my birth a little bit ago as in the late 1900s, which really brought home to me how much things have changed. But anyway, we're looking at now the largest cohort of the population and workforce of 2017. So like Danny said, very much integrated into our current workforce. They're famously, first digital natives, folks that grew up being part of the internet, don't really have a firm memory of the world pre-internet, for example. Characterized by lower rates of home ownership, higher debt, and marrying and having kids, those kind of big life decisions later in life. Those are some kind of generational differences. To speak about the background, this fellow is apparently, his role is to work on his devices and look in other directions. He comes up several times in the presentation if you can spot him. So let's talk about shared economic history. This is an important element of what you do see that's different about the millennial generation and kind of what they had to go through growing up. Kind of an interesting history here. So this chart shows the unemployment rates and recessions in Oregon, the gray part being recessions. So you can see unemployment spiked obviously in the Great Recession around 2008 and then spiked in 2020 as a result of COVID. Those are two different experiences that affected millennials at different points in their life. So the Great Recession had record for the time unemployment, characterized by a very slow jobs recovery, especially in Lane County. It took 8.5 years for us to get all of our jobs back that we lost in the Great Recession. Characterized by a lot of middle income job destruction in industries like construction and manufacturing. And millennials at this time were aged about 12 to 28. So we're talking folks that were just establishing themselves in a career or maybe still in high school or not quite in high school yet, but a really formative time in people's economic experiences. And so it's reasonable to think that they might have taken different paths if they were studying for something in college at this point than they would have had the Great Recession not happen. Couple that with the second kind of economic trauma that happened in the last 10 to 20 years, the COVID-19 recession, which reached even higher levels of record unemployment and was characterized by a really fast jobs recovery, relatively speaking, which created some wage gains, a lot of worker movement. We see a lot of high turnover and job switching going on as people think about, is this really the career that I want to have? And also characterized by low income job destruction, not only in industries like leisure and hospitality, but kind of across the board. During this time, millennials were aged 24 to 39. So those younger folks who missed the last recession in their employment life are definitely experiencing it now as they're about 24, 25 and trying to establish themselves in their career. So is this destiny? Are there going to be more variations in between generations than among them? I don't necessarily think so. I think there's always variations in generations, but it's important to recognize that people are determined by the economic situations that they grew up in. So I think that there's an important element in thinking about how to integrate millennials into the workforce that comes from that. Millennials are pretty much everywhere in the workforce already. So let's talk about in Lane County in 2021. This is the percentage of each industry that is 25 to 44, not quite millennial, but around the age in 2021. The spread between industries is only about 10-ish%. It only spreads out about 5% from the average. So the highest admin support and waste services, that's things like temp agencies and stuff like that, about 48%, the lowest transportation and warehousing, 37%. So really what I would emphasize is kind of regardless of what industry you're in, this is something to be concerned about, something to be aware of, and no industry has a small number of people from this generation. Now, what does vary a lot by age is occupations, as you might guess. So like, for example, there are far fewer CEOs that are millennials than in other jobs. So there is that sort of data available, but broadly speaking, that has to do with more the stage you are in your career. But no industry shouldn't be concerned about this, especially because about 9 out of 10 job openings are due to replacement, things like people retiring. So there's all this natural churn going on in the workforce that is going to affect, everybody in our economy, essentially. So very important thing to be aware of. Speaking more about what the millennial generation looks like, this data is from 2015, but it holds essentially the same. It's a more diverse generation than previous generations. This is for the US, but we're looking at about 75% non-Hispanic white for folks 55 and older, and about 56% non-Hispanic white for the millennial generation, with growth in essentially every group of people besides non-Hispanic whites. So that is relevant as we think about workforce transition and workplace transition. It's especially true here. I didn't include this data in this presentation, but I talk about this a lot. We are less diverse than the nation as a whole, but because we are less diverse as a whole, as a new generation comes in that's more diverse, that change happens more rapidly on a percentage basis. So again, not something that anybody can really have the luxury of not being aware of or not being attentive to. Millennials on average are more educated and more impoverished than previous generations, which has impacts on what they look like for the labor force. So more likely to have a bachelor's degree. This is 3 cohorts of young people, 1980, 2000, and 2015. You can see the orange bar there is the number of people with a bachelor's degree or higher. That's highest for this generation. And interestingly, led by women in this generation, whereas in previous generations, about equal split or men more likely to attain a bachelor's degree. Home ownership, less likely in this generation relative to 1980 and 2000. Obviously coming up during a time where there was a housing-based recession had a big impact on this, but also rising housing prices, things like that. And then living in poverty. More people live in poverty, more young people live in poverty now in 2015 than did in previous generations. The one reason when we talk about, for example, more likely to attain a bachelor's degree, the returns to education for this generation are higher, which I bring up because that is relevant to how people make their decisions. So in previous generations, the spread between earning a bachelor's degree and not was not nearly as large as it was for young people in the late 2010s. The returns to a bachelor's degree are a lot higher, which has shaped a lot of a lot of decision making about what to do, what kind of careers to pursue, and is a challenge for example, industries that have high wage careers that don't necessarily require a bachelor's degree. I've heard that a lot working with businesses, how to make people's backgrounds that, if you look at the data, it's pretty natural that more people will go to college, how to make that match up with the jobs that they have available that maybe pay very well and are very fulfilling, that were not as available in most millennials' minds as they're considering their options. Real quickly about job hopping. So millennials get a bad rap as hopping around between jobs. This one I'm pretty confident saying has more to do with age than to do with millennials in particular being disloyal, for example. So this is the number of years by age that the median person spends in their job. And you can see kind of regardless of whether we're talking about 1983 or 2010, it averages by your age about the same amount. People that are 18 or 19 have generally been in a job less than a year, as you might imagine. People in their 20s to early 30s, around 3 years. That hasn't changed much in the last 40 years, for example. It has much more to do with the age you are when you have a job. It does go up in recessions because people are more likely to hold on to their jobs if they keep them. So that is generally what has the most impact. And then what I'm going to close with is I'm going to look at some of the things that millennials say matter to them as employees. The top 5 things that millennials look for when applying for jobs, this comes from a Gallup study that does a cohort approach to looking at what millennials say is important to them, which again, might be different than the reality, but this is what they say. Opportunities to learn and grow, quality of management, interest in type of work, and opportunities for advancement. Those are probably not shocking to anyone looking for a job, but there are some relevant things to be taken from this. So for example, 59% of millennials report that opportunities to learn and grow are extremely important, which is higher than previous generations. Again, does it have more to do with them being young workers that need more opportunities to learn and grow? Potentially, but it is an important thing to know as you're thinking about how to best serve this population as a workforce or integrate them into your place of work. One other thing I want to highlight, there is a kind of workplace disconnect that is sometimes present with this particular generation or with younger workers in general. So 43% of millennials versus 57% of older generations strongly agree that they know what their coworkers are expected to do at work, which especially in like a remote work environment might be pretty impactful if you're feeling connected and understanding what everyone else is doing. And a slightly lower percentage strongly agree that they know the strengths of the people they work with. Again, kind of talking about integration into the workforce and their team. Other things that come up, millennials strongly agree that 61% said they have regular meetings, but only 19% receive routine feedback and only 17% of them receive meaningful feedback. That being said, if you're a manager and are looking to change this, only 15% were able to own up to the fact that they routinely ask for feedback. So this might not be something that comes up on its own unless you're willing to lead that charge. And only 33% say they have told their manager the thing that they need the most to get their work done and why. So again, maybe a young person thing, maybe a millennial thing, but something that is difficult for that worker to ask for that they might feel that they need regardless. So that's not everything there is to say about millennials. In fact, the most interesting stuff is going to come from this panel, which I'll introduce here in just a second. My contact information is included here. And like Danny said, this presentation and the recording will be shared with everyone. So please feel free to reach out to me if you want to talk more about any of this. But, and we'll have some, we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So don't worry about that. Feel free to throw those into the chat as they come up. But I'm going to go ahead and turn and introduce our panel now and ask them a few questions. So first, I'd love to introduce Karen Lyons with Oakmont family. Karen loves living in Oregon. When she's not busy enjoying the outdoors with her husband and daughter, she's spending her time at Oakmont Family Dental. She feels blessed to be part of their team as their marketing director. Oakmont Family Dental has her heart because she loves how they treat patients and staff. And the core of the business is to give back to the community. So thank you so much for being here, Karen. Next, Ryan Williams, an HR specialist with Ninewood. Ryan's been with Ninewood for 1.5 years and is the HR manager. He spent the previous 15 years of his career in the asset protection and loss prevention world in retail. He has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Portland State University and is currently halfway through an MBA program. Ninewood is one of the leading producers of custom wood ceilings for businesses and universities. They regard themselves as a second chance company and love giving folks an opportunity to work there. So welcome, Ryan. And finally, Mark Harrington, a journeyman carpenter, recruiter, and trainer with Chambers Construction, has been with Chambers since 2014 and brings to the table more than 45 years of construction industry experience. So Mark heads up the Chambers Construction Apprenticeship Program, Chambers in-house training program that helps people learn the trade while earning a living. Welcome, Mark. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to ask a few questions and kind of give it to the group round robin to discuss their experiences, because I think you'll each have some pretty interesting things to say on each of these. My first question for the group, and also feel free to comment if you thought some things from my presentation particularly stand out, or there's things that don't jive with your experience too. I'd love to hear that. So first question, broad for the group. What is your organization doing to hire, attract, and retain the next generation of professionals based on their outlooks and priorities? So let's go ahead and start it with Karen, and then we'll go to Ryan and Mark.
Perfect. So yeah, I think that you have to look at your company as a whole and how you can level up, right? So it is a different time. And at Oakmont, we have felt that creating learning opportunities. So we saw a need for dental assistants in the community, and we created a whole training program. We now have a dental school. So it's thinking outside the box there of how you can attract and also level up your business at the same time. So other things that we do, we're looking at maybe creating marketing internships in the near future. That's a huge field for this generation. So, and I think there's a missed opportunity with the type of community that we have here. Marketing looks a lot different in Eugene, Oregon than it does as a global like classroom. So we see need for teaching that as well as being good partners and stewardships in our community. So those are some of our big things and takeaways, is building, you know, a new way to learn and build your business at the same time.
All right.
So one of the first things that we did is we got some data from, we use Indeed for our postings, as well as our traffic from our website, and we discovered that 75 to 80% of our traffic was mobile based, and that was something that was a little bit unexpected. And so we did a deep dive on our company website, our jobs website, our Indeed posting, and saw that it wasn't the best mobile friendliness. And so we were really disengaging 75 to 80% of the people looking at our site. So we did a complete redesign focusing on mobile development. And so that was one of the first steps that we did there. It increased our click-through application rate by about 6% on Indeed. So we did see a pretty noticeable bump from there. One of the things that we also did was we looked at our interviewing as a whole. And we typically Ninewood is moved to this, it's called a top grading form of interviewing. And it's different than the standard star based interview questions where people can sort of have canned answers ready to go. And this method of interviewing is more of it facilitates conversation, open discussion. It asks you about your high school days. What did you like about high school? Some of your favorite classes. And a lot of people are really caught by surprise when we open up with some of those questions. So it facilitates a nice, healthy conversation. We also do a plant tour for production workers. So if we have prospective production workers for the second interview, we'll bring them in, take them on a plant tour, show them our operations, show them our beautiful wood ceilings that we make, and engage there. And a recent tool that I started using for retaining talent was stay interviews. So I read a book about 6 months ago on stay interviews, and a stay interview is the opposite of an exit interview. So an exit interview is typically what you meet with an employee on their last day, and they tell you some reasons that may or may not be true and why they're leaving the company. With a stay interview, you're asking employees who are longer tenured why they're choosing to stay at your company when there's so many opportunities, especially right now, available. So there's some really good insight and feedback that you can get from your current employees with the stay interview.
Fantastic. Mark, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, in our case, what we did is about 5 years ago, we sat down and looked at the situation with exiting employees and the fact that the trades for a long time have been kind of held in disrepair and in disdain and not brought people in regularly to the trades. And so we looked at our apprenticeship program we were using. It was supposed to be a 4-year apprenticeship program, and it was turning out to take more like 6 years to get our employees through it. So it was long running and it was expensive, and it wasn't giving us the quality of employee we wanted. So we went and sat down as a corporate team and looked at what could we do differently. And we said, hey, one of the first things we realized is that a bunch of these people that are going to be exiting in the future are our biggest experience base. And so we started using them as instructors along with myself and I recruit for the individuals to come into the program. But once they get here, we use those existing employees as trainers, as well as our on-site carpenters that are training daily with our apprentices. It's been a really successful program. We had our first graduation last year. We're looking at another one shortly, and it's working well for us. And I think it's something that any company can do at some level once they identify what their needs are.
That's very similar to our dental assisting program as well. It's kind of employee based and led through our dental assistants there. And it's an accelerated program too. That's the other, to get people into the workforce in an accelerated way.
It's really excellent to hear a couple of things. First of all, there's that hire, recruit, retain, like triple threat focus, which is really interesting that you all brought up. But there's also no silver bullet, is what I hear in a lot of these things. It takes a lot of thoughtful work on a lot of different levels, and it's very neat to see the ways that we can, for example, cross-pollinate, but establishing your own training programs indoors. I have a lot more questions about that I'm sure the audience will as well, that we can explore if we have time. But thank you all for that. It's really, really interesting to hear about the proactive approaches. My next question that I wanted to ask you all that goes a little bit more in depth from what we're talking about with things like stay interviews. How do you provide training, mentoring, professional development for your employees? So not only helping them get the credentials they need to establish in their job, but maintain that level of competency and increasing their happiness at work. Let's go the same order that we just went in for that.
Perfect. I think a lot of companies do miss the mark on this. Once they have, a way of doing things, they kind of keep it the same and it stays kind of flat, to be honest. At Oakmont, we invest a huge amount in training every year. So we have quarterly trainings focused on something different every quarter where we can improve. We know that we're never a 10, even though we say we provide the best. There's always room for growth for our entire team. But we also flip it back. We do these important trainings for our business, but we also do them for our staff personally. We offer a financial stewardship class that we hire a company to come in and teach our staff how they can be more comfortable in their lives, how they can lower their debt, how they can retire early. And if they stay with us, what does that look like for them in the future? And so we are still one of the few companies that offers 401k matching. That's kind of an old theory that a lot of younger people don't understand the importance. And we try to teach them that as they come into Oakmont. Even if they don't stay with us, we feel like it's an important part of our generation that may be getting missed or don't see the big picture long-term when they're, we hire anywhere. I would say our prime age is between right now 18 and 26.
All right. Yeah. So for our training and development, we are a manufacturer. So, I'll keep it as brief as possible. We use some niche concepts and some manufacturer specific concepts. One of which is called TWI, training within industry. So I'm not sure how many people are familiar with that. It's also known as the Toyota way. It was made popular at World War II. And it really standardizes training in the facility for all roles, tools. Each location has their specific training that every person goes through. It's standardized. So we have certified trainers that go through actual TWI training program to become certified trainers. And the biggest mantra of the TWI is, if the learner hasn't learned, the trainer hasn't trained. And so every class that they teach, they really make sure they know how to adapt to different learning styles. Everybody learns differently. There's hands-on exercises to go over these concepts. And we also do refresher trainings every year on, everything from hand saws to the machines and the legal trainings, all that stuff. For development, we encourage classes. So I believe Henry brought up the large debt load that a lot of millennials have. And so we like to encourage those who are, say, in our drafting program or engineers, that they can take some classes that Ninewood would pay for, provided they pass the class and if it's relevant to their job. So we offer those opportunities as well. We're also, part of the TWI is we offer some of our engineers and other staff to go through Lean Six Sigma training and certification. We just got a couple new black belts added. So some of our longer term employees just got their Six Sigma black belts. And we also encourage anyone, even if they're day one out on the floor, to suggest any process improvements that say, hey, I feel like it'd be better if you did it this way. We never discourage that. We never shut that down. So we encourage those employees to speak freely, because it's manufacturing is a continuous evolving flow. So we're moving stuff around all the time.
Mark, how about for you? What does training, mentoring, and professional development look like?
Well, I hear a lot of the same things from these other groups, so I won't bore everybody with that. But one of the things that we have done recently is invest heavily in a training facility, to have an on-site facility here at our shop that we can use for training, not only for our apprenticeship program, but for all of our employees to have continuing education and those kinds of opportunities. So that's been one of the really nice things that's been done. We run very similar to to what Oakmont's talking about. We run built into our curriculum, our budgeting classes, discussion about 401ks, saving for the future, benefit packages that are available to the employees and those kinds of things. So the general word is very similar. And like I say, it's been impressive to see how much the company's invested in facility and the opportunity to be able to have these classes across the board, not just for our apprenticeship, but for all employees.
I have a takeaway for the listeners too, and it comes from our Dr. owner, Matt McLaughlin. He, in a leadership meeting just the other day, we were talking about some of our training processes, and he said, we don't practice till we get it right. We practice till we don't ever get it wrong.
Very true.
Yeah, that's great. And it's interesting to see. I think these three companies are united by the fact that their leadership is really aligned behind creating an environment where there is constant learning going on. That's, in my experience, that's been a really critical element of retaining people, making them feel valued. And like we saw from my slides, that's something that matters a lot to this generation and to young workers in general. So bravo for that. What I would love to ask y'all next is, based on your experiences in these programs, setting them up, and this could be areas of learning for you that you did not expect when you first started. What have you learned to be areas of importance to the next generation of professionals when they're looking for careers or job opportunities? So Karen, anything that comes out when I ask that?
Yeah, I think that the best thing is that letting your employees know from day one that they're being heard and they're part of a team that fosters that. As I normally have all new hires as their first training, as like who we are as a whole as a company. But then I also make sure that leadership team and those owners are accessible to them. Don't ever feel like they're in a position where they can't move forward with thoughts or new ideas, and making them know that they're part of a company. I guess that I take away, as I've been in the field for a long time, is that someone younger than myself may not know what it's like to work for good people versus like a corporation that is totally different. And I give them insight on that from day one. Like I sit them down and say, work is going to be hard. There's going to be at the end of the day where you want to go home and you didn't want to be here maybe that day. That's the reality of, these jobs that are fast paced and there's a lot. But at the end of the day, when you have that feeling, know that you work for people that support you and they're genuinely good people. And that is something that you can never buy. You can't get in another job that's paying you a higher salary. Like that's established from day one. And I give them kind of personal experiences. I don't need to go into like full detail about that, but we also ask them as in a check-in that give us 3 things as you're new that are going well and 3 things that aren't. Like, what could we do to make it better? How was your training process at the end of it? Would you do something different? We're all human. We can all change the way that we do things, even though we're the leadership part of a company. And that adds to it. And then just one other quick thing is that I'll say from a marketing standpoint is that when you build your brand, you're not only building it for your business and like your clientele, you're building it for your employees. So like Oakmont, we've really tried to make that presence in our community, that we support it, that we're part of it. And when you come to be part of our team, you get to be part of that too. And it's a big goal for this year. And you'll see that coming from us is that our staff has opportunities every month to be a part of that drive, a part of that vision and mission for the company, that it's just not something that we're doing and they don't get to experience it too. So that's, that part has been my baby. So I'm very proud of that. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
For myself, I've only been doing HR for about 1.5 years. So I joined right in the heart of all of this craziness. So I've done a lot of learning. And one of the things that we discovered throughout the natural progression of the pandemic is that remote work is here to stay. And in Ninewood, before the pandemic, everybody worked on site. Everybody was crammed into little spaces, and we were just trying to find the next cubby hole for the next person as our company grew and grew. And the remote work, when it started, it thought was just be a temporary measure. And now I would say probably 85% of our office staff works completely remote. We have people who work in other states now, so we've opened up other states. So just really being flexible with office employees and allowing them to work remote. A lot of them have felt like it's easier to facilitate communication to their supervisor. We use Microsoft Teams, so they have instant messaging to reach out to somebody, as opposed to trying to run around and trying to find somebody, and then they can never cross paths with somebody. Another thing is that we're really big with our flexible with PTO policies. So we encourage people to take time off where they need to. You don't need to, we don't have any rules on, you got to give us a 1 month advance notice for you're going to take time off. If you need to take time off, we're going to accommodate you and do the best we can for you. Which was another thing is Ninewood is very big on trying to not to have too many bureaucratic policies. I believe in one of the slides that Henry presented, as well as Hertzberg, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Hertzberg two-factor theory, but company policy administration sort of bureaucracy is the #1 job to satisfy, according to his research. And a prime example Ninewood did 5 or 6 years ago is we instituted a dress code, and it went against our company values. It went against that, and it lasted about 10 days before the general management team realized that they made a terrible mistake where they just sort of did it. They couldn't think of a reason to do it, and they did it just to have that policy, and it completely backfired and really disengaged a lot of employees. But they fixed that really quickly. And then we have some values things, but I'll save that for the next question.
Mark, how about you? How about Chambers?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we've found is that it seems to be really important to the people in our program that there is a future advancement beyond the career they're training for. And due to the fact that we have retirees and those kinds of things coming up, I've been telling all of my apprentices that, we're looking at in the next 10 years, there's basically not a job in this company that probably won't be open. And that seems to be really important, is that they see that future growth above and beyond the career they're training for right now. There's been a lot of effort on the part of management and myself both to build programs that will facilitate, some of the things that we're hearing from our employees again and again that they want. They want to be homeowners, they want to be involved in further education, they want these different things. And as much as is reasonable, we're working on programs around that. And the big thing that we found with our program is if you build a program like ours, or I'm sure that Oakmont will join in on this, it's never done. You always have to be growing with it. There's always a new group of people that are coming in. There's a new style that's more affordable or more flexible for that particular situation in that day and that group. And if you think you can build it and just sit back and watch it like a garden grow, it doesn't work that way.
Excellent. And we have so many good questions coming in the chat. I'm excited to get to our Q&A. The last question that I want to pose to the panel as a whole has to do with values, which came up several times already in our discussion. So Karen was mentioning helping people understand that management is generally good people. People are accessible. Management is accessible. I think it's a really important question. I didn't talk much in my presentation about values. There is this view that young workers, or millennials in particular, are very values driven. And want to see a company that reflects their worldview. But I want to open up to the group, because this is for each industry that you all are in, there is a value, there's a value impact from the work you do, whether it's building, whether it's manufacturing a quality product, or healthcare, dental care. So I want to know, for you all, how do you think about reinforcing that values-based culture in your organization, which is something that is attractive to the next generation of professionals and young people in particular? Karen, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, sure. This is something that has been our biggest focus probably in the last couple years. We actually created what we call a culture team. It's not leadership really, other than myself on it, helping run that. But if day one, if we hire a new employee, I go over the whole culture team. We meet monthly. We come up with all of our staff engagement whatever that is, volunteering. We celebrate national holidays at our work, like Hot Chocolate Day. There's all kinds of fun internal things that happen for us. And I'll say it from a marketing perspective again, is that we do so much internal marketing, and that includes our staff. When we're think about referrals from our patients, we also think about it from our staff. Like if they're happy and engaged working at Oakmont, that's beneficial to our business. They bring their mom, their dad, their entire family comes to see us, and they get to be part of that. But I think that just being very aware of culture and engagement and kind of coming up with a plan. So we have one sponsored Oakmont event every month, and then we have one staff engagement. That's outside of what Oakmont does. It's on their own time. It gets them to connect with their coworkers. And I think the connection with coworkers is what builds that culture. We also ask everyone, and we take questionnaires often about what culture means to them, and what do they value at certain dollar amounts. Like, let's say we're going to give them a bonus. Like if they could have anything for $100, what would that look like? If they could have anything for 50. So we have a really good drive on what that looks like. We'll come up with challenges. We did health and wellness challenge to kind of get everyone to come together at the beginning of the year. So I think it's thinking outside of your day-to-day routine at work, that you have to invest in your staff just like you invest in your business as a whole.
Yeah, and so for us, value is a really big piece of our company, and one of our big values is servant leadership. Leadership that serves, not I'm the master type of mentality. And without getting into crazy details, we use a structure called regular organization. And basically what it means is that the supervisor is responsible for the output of their employees. So if the employee themselves aren't performing, we looked at the supervisor, and they have ownership with their productivity. We also, as a company, when we make decisions as a general management team, we facilitate a win-win or no deal mindset. So if it's not going to benefit everyone involved, we're not going to make a deal with that. And one of the questions that we ask is this decision, will this foster trust or will this foster suspicion when it comes to that? And so we are an open book company. So a quick backstory is that our founders and owners of the company, they went to work one day at their company, and the gates were locked. Everything was barred. They went bankrupt. Nobody knew about it. Nobody knew the company's in any danger. And so they made a commitment to themselves that when they started Ninewood, that they were going to be an open book company. So every month we go over the financials with the entire company. Charlie, our owner, is there leading, facilitating the meeting. Anybody can ask questions. We review our performance, whether we gained money, lost money, what our future outlook's going to be. So there are no secrets whatsoever. All employees should know the score. All of our stakeholders should know the score. And we also do survive and thrive meetings as well. It was mainly for COVID, but we've stuck it around. So we talk about safety, how to remain safe, and use it as a non-financial meeting and any important issues that come up. So just the leadership of the company being out, open, engaging the whole company at least twice a month in the meeting has been really helpful with facilitating our values.
Excellent. Thank you, Ryan. So Mark, what does value-based culture look like at Chambers?
Chambers has done a great job of coming up with their core value of building what's important in people's lives, and as well, they have set their core value program up around 6 basic core values that run the gamut from building long-term relationships to being a problem solver and so on and so forth. And those core values are pretty much what we live and die by. And so as a result, all of our employees know that, and they're all playing towards that common goal. There's also, all the financial side of everything is well taken care of and well handled, as far as the fact that if there's a change in pay scales or whatever, we make sure that they get taken care of immediately. Quality control is always a big part of what we do. And so it's part of what we teach as well in our apprenticeship classes. And so those kids are looking at, not only am I learning this trade and learning this skill, but I know, where the minimum, the maximum, those different points that you need to be at to be in a saleable product on a regular basis. when we started a program recently, it was suggested by one of our project managers, and we've gone to Boss for a Day. We take one of our apprentices and throw them in the role of leading the crew, and it makes them think outside the box a little bit, and it makes them realize what their superintendents and their foremans and other people are dealing with. And it seems to be working really well. The apprentices are really enjoying it, and it challenges what they've learned, and it also challenges them to, you know, step up to the next level, which we're always hopeful they'll do.
What I hear as common themes here is really interesting. I hear a lot of trust in employees being reflected in the type of things that you're asking them to do. I hear a lot of the value comes out by allowing someone to be committed and aligned with what our company as a whole is doing. And I think that's really honestly a best practice that you can see goes across industries. Just from my own perspective, Ryan mentioned servant leadership. I think one thing the employment department does really well, Oregon Employment Department research employs that same sort of model. And I think that it's a great empowering mindset to take employees and tell them that they have the freedom to do what they need to get their tasks accomplished, and that management's going to support them doing that. I think that that is a very empowering thing that can help your workers feel a lot more connected with one another with the work they do. I've seen great results of that. So we have maybe about 25 minutes for questions. I have a bunch stockpiled here that I'm going to try to go through. If you think of any others, please put them in the chat. Or raise your hand, and we can get people asking their own questions. But I'm just going to go through. Some of these are for the whole panel, and some are for particular folks. I'm going to start from what I noted from the top. If I missed any, please let me know. Ryan, the first question goes to you. This comes from Paige. I'd be curious what feedback you're getting during the stay interview about why people choose to stay with Ninewood.
The most common feedback is our culture and our open book policies, and you know, not very many companies out there, you know, especially we have temps who've worked at a bunch of places where, you know, every month that leader, that company is going to come forward and give you the whole story. And so they really appreciate that. And a lot of our longer tenured people who've been here since the beginning, they really appreciate that culture piece of it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like you were just saying in your last answer, that trust really reflect. I don't think that companies can really trust their employees too much. Obviously, there's a limit to that, but I think that is a really undervalued concept in employee retention. Marty, did you have a hand up? You want to ask your question?
Well, I sent you those really long ones.
I can read those out if you want.
You want to ask them, or should I?
Go ahead.
Well, I really appreciate what you guys being on this. It really just backs up a lot of things that I've been saying. So thank you for being on, and Henry, thanks for facilitating. I'm a numbers geek, so I love it when numbers back up my totally freaked out marketing brain when I'm thinking outside the box. I'm thinking outside of when I'm working with businesses. You guys are creating a culture, and I keep telling a lot of people when they're talking about this, and I love we're talking about the millennials and all this. It's all about the culture. Right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. And what I always want to kind of get into is this 150 million pound gorilla that's sitting in the room called at will that nobody talks about. And it's like, this is the thing that happens here in Oregon since I've been here for the last 15 years or so. Okay, maybe not that many, but it's been an issue. People have kind of felt as though they're easily replaceable, right? And now that COVID's hit and we're out of COVID, now people are starting to realize that people want to maintain their staffing. They want to maintain their personnel, and people really want to stay. And it's not just millennials. There's people like me that have been in and out of positions, but now I have my own biz. You guys are doing what's right. You're creating a culture. You have this internal thing. You have mentors. You have people that are keeping them in the workforce. Why is that not catching on like wildfire with other people? Because that's what I feel like is missing. It's that connection point in the brain that we need people to make sure they understand, yes, this is an at-will state. However, we want you to stay. We're going to be doing a review process before you're in trouble. We want to talk to you and help you grow and develop. Why is that not catching on? That's my question. That's my first one.
So I'll turn it to anybody that wants to answer that. I will say, I think from my perspective, there is more discussion about this than there used to be. People have a greater appreciation. But one thing I'd love each of the panelists to talk about is, I think there are some there is thinking that certain things are more difficult than they are, or more difficult than they need to be. And I'd love some examples or other feedback from you all to think about that.
I think companies can just think other things are more important before their employees. I mean, once they get them, they're just moving on to the next thing. Maybe it could be, some businesses struggled through COVID. It's like just getting to that next step, however I get there, and not stopping the brakes sometimes and thinking it through and putting in the effort for the longevity. I mean, I think that employers do it just as employees do, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree, Karen. There's such a big focus on, especially when you have a new hire, that first 30, 60, 90 days and that so-called probationary period. And then, once that period has passed, those employees tend to be forgotten about. And so it's just maintaining your focus and making sure that you're scheduling check-ins. So we're not perfect at it, but we encourage each supervisor to have check-in meetings with their employees, once a month. We have remote only teams. And so it can be a little more difficult. So actually what our drafting team does is they hold a 30-minute weekly water cooler meeting where they're actually not allowed to talk about anything work related. So it's just a 30-minute meeting where you just talk about each other, what you're going through, how your week's been going, to really sort of replicate that water cooler meeting that a lot of those employees don't have a chance to experience anymore.
When we do annual reviews too, so at Oakmont, we have what we call managers or team leaders. Each team has one, and then obviously doctor owners. But when that annual time comes, they get to sit with their team leader, but for a period of time, but then they leave and that employee actually still gets to sit with Matt and Jeb, our doctor owners, because again, management's not always perfect. So they may not be relaying the same message to the owners of this company that these employees are representing, right? And that's how you have to look at it. Even though you're this business owner and you're doing all these things, these other people are the face of your company, right? So if you're not treating them well and they're not being heard, your vision for your company is not happening anyway. So like you do need to take a step back and spend this time if you want service and your, reputation to be represented well. That's coming through these people that you're hiring. So if you're not spending the time, effort, and money, you're really shooting yourself in the foot in long term.
Yeah. Another thing just to add to that is if you are only meeting with your employees, once or twice a year for reviews, we do reviews twice a year, to make sure that it's as personalized as possible. Because if you're not meeting with them frequently and they feel like it's a cookie cutter check-in process, it can be really disengaging. This is the only time they're getting with you and it's not really personal. It's really going to disengage the employees.
I mean, literally, it's not a hard process. And I'm a feedback guy by nature. So it's just like, what I'm doing, do I need to do this, do that? And then it's just a mindset of, so the follow up to that, I don't want to dominate everybody. So I'll just make this really quick. It relates to, I got to play it because I'm usually the only guy here that does this. I can't see everybody. I only see 5 across the top of the row here, but relates to how your interactions go. We talked about this, and you mentioned this, Henry, especially when it goes to the diversity of our area. Right? People come in. We're not a diverse area, just by nature, but people start coming in, and especially millennials, just because the university or whatever the case may be. Let's talk about communication styles. How does that affect how you interact? How does that cross-cultural communication happen? Is that a problem? Do you guys have training? Do you find that challenging? Do you have any issues with? Or is it just like we just have to just go with it? How do you engage cross-cultural communication issues when it comes to retention and development and that sort of thing?
I mean, I can go, but I don't want to dominate everyone else's time either. But as you're hired at our company, we actually do what we call Colby, which is very similar to a personality test. And it's kind of based on numbers. So my number is 5564. I'm pretty even kill personality. but it's like fact finder, implementer, quick start. So it's like how you retain and how you would need to get your job done. So like I can say as a whole, for some crazy reason, all of our hygienists are fact finders. So we know that they need all the information possible to communicate with each other and implement something new. So we know that we can't just say like, hey, we're doing this, and they're going to jump on that. Like for me, I'm like, okay, I can do it either way. Our doctor owners are two totally different like number scale. One's a quick start, and he's like flying off the rails with ideas like for 10 years later. And I'm like, okay, I know that I don't have to get to that now. So we do try to understand like as a whole, and we have walkers and everyone's numbers are on there. So when you do communicate with someone or you ask something of them, you know why maybe they're not jumping on it, or how you can get them to do what you need them to do. And that's inner team too, not just management with staff. And we joke about it, you know, like, oh, that's just his quick start personality. We'll move on.
Yeah, anything else panelists want to share? I think that Marty's questions are really helpful here. I think that we don't have enough time to elaborate all the things that we need to be able to today. But what I would love to do is keep the conversation going, because I constantly am coming up against people that want to do, for example, these sort of things better. It's great to point to positive examples of here's how intercultural communication can work in the workplace. So if you have other opportunities to share how you do it best, that's a great thing to share with the chamber, share at future meetings like this, so we can get everybody thinking about this. How does it look differently now? How can we do it better? I have a little bit of a gear shift. I'm going to start with Mark on this one because I think it's pretty relevant to your training program. Nadia asks, once your employees are fully trained, how do you prevent them from moving on to another job? Do you use incentives? What do you do? So if you get somebody that's been through the training program, how do you keep them in the chambers?
So far, it's been, predominantly based on the fact that their benefit package is amazing, that they're well compensated, they're taken care of within industry standards for scale and those kinds of things. A lot of it's financial. A lot of it's about realizing that you work for a very family-oriented style company that takes care of each other on a real high level. And I've seen it time and again in my 20 years with this company that they've stepped up to the plate to help somebody that's having a health issue or whatever. And the employees seem to really realize the value in that. And they also understand that, there's a future beyond their job, like we were talking about earlier, that, if they want to move on to the next level to a project engineer or project manager or some other level, superintendent, foreman, whatever their goals are, that will help them get there. And I think they see the value in that. And so far, our retention has been really good.
Thank you so much for your answer. I appreciate it.
Karen, anything to add? I mean, you also have a program that creates graduates that can transfer somewhere else.
Yeah, it is kind of just creating that value in your company once again, but allowing it to happen. Sometimes it's not easy when we have a front desk person, which seems to be the position that we always need the most as we grow, is they always want to go into the dental assisting program. It's like a next step, or a sterilization check. That's one level below a dental assistant. We've had so many internal employees that want to go through that program, and just being open to that growth for them and like seeing them grow. And if they love working there, normally if they can keep moving up and stay within that company and learn from your doctors, they will,
Excellent.
And the other part that's scary to that is when we run this program, we actually work with some other offices around town to let them have a variety of interning other places, orthodontic offices, other dental offices. So we do take that risk. So like you really have to have something that they feel that they're valued and a part of, so they do come back to you when they're done.
I think that confidence pays off. I think that is useful. You got to be okay with the idea that somebody might leave and let them know that here's why you should stay. I think that's a great point. Ashley, raising your hand, you got a question to the group?
Hello, yes, I do. Good afternoon, everyone. Are we? Yeah, we are afternoon. My question, I guess, is around, when we're looking at what motivates both the employer and the workforce to spend really their time, like YOLO, right? We only live once. So like we're spending more time at work than we spend in any other spaces. And so I'm just curious where this fits in the equation, and especially talking through construction, let's say as a sector. My husband is a union carpenter, so I'm always, talking to him about his experience on the work sites and things like that. But my question is that where does productivity land in this? Like our expectation of what the output, because I think that, thinking out burnout and kind of back to the comment of YOLO, like are we managing our expectations realistically to protect our human capital, and knowing that, we can do more, make more, do all of these things, but is that really what we want to do and how we want to show up? So I'm just thinking like organizational wellness and thinking about our expectations of productivity, what that looks like. Again, I I don't even know if I'm asking my question well, but I would be curious what you all think of that.
Yeah, well, just to rephrase, Ashley, and tell me if I'm saying this wrong, but basically, how do you incorporate into training, management, mentoring, that employees understand that they, should take their own health seriously, that they should not, put training at the expense, or working at the expense of all other things? How do you integrate that into what you're thinking?
Yeah, and I'll just add to, and I just think like that on construction, and I'm not trying to pick on that construction, but I'm just saying they have their production times, like we need to get this done by this time because of money. A lot of times it has to do with money, but we're not thinking about what we're actually doing to the workers to actually meet that goal. So I'm just curious where that lands in the equation.
What we continually find is that those individuals that we train become an asset rather than a liability to productivity, because we try to put them on jobs that move them to their next step. So each time that they get a skill mastered, then their next step is whatever's beyond that. And we find that their pickup on the new task becomes quicker and quicker and quicker as they go through the program. And that productivity is really not the big concern that everybody thinks it is. They think you're building a program and you're going to slow down your productivity. The truth is you're actually going to increase it because you put a new worker in the field that wasn't there before.
And I think it goes back to those like core values of a company. I mean, we are always a family first kind of company. So I feel like people that see that within your company, maybe, we've had some people that have had major illnesses in the last few years, and watching and seeing how we handle that as a whole, as a company, that our employees do come first, or maybe they're mistreated by a patient would be an example of, that we're not expecting them to, we're not allowing that for our staff, and so I think it comes to that kind of respect for what's allowed, and how they're treated, and kind of having a kind of, during COVID, I'll use that as an example. We had to work Saturdays to kind of catch up, being closed for 3 months, and we were burnt out and we were crazy tired, and recognizing that and coming up with some reward for your staff, not just keep going with emotions and waiting until it gets better. So I think just keeping your eyes open to what's going on in your business and hearing what goes on. I mean, for me, I live where employees, my office is right there. So I hear the chatter that's going on all the time amongst them. So that gets brought to meetings. Even if they're not saying it directly, it's still happening.
Yeah, we do a few things. So for one, my office is smack dab in the middle of the production facility. So I'm here in production, seeing what's going on, getting out and chatting with everybody. But we use software for our production, and we calculate based on the head count that we want to have, the amount of what we call it's called DBR, Dipper hours. Basically, it's the hours per employee, and we set our employees that we want, and then we schedule around that set amount of hours we want. So we're ensuring, our employees aren't needing to work 50, 55 hours a week to maintain productivity. We have ample buffer times. Overtimes on Friday are very rare, mandatory. So typically we keep it optional. We just schedule it in so we have a nice steady workflow. For our salaried managers, we like to keep an eye on their hours if they're working per pay period. So if they're, routinely working 55, 60-hour weeks, we check in and be like, what's going on? How can we support you? We've noticed you've been putting in a lot of hours lately. Is this a seasonal thing? Is it because of a large rush in the front end? And how can we help you work down some of your hours so we don't get burnt out? We also encourage PTO, taking time off. I think I mentioned that before. And we just open door, open forum for any burnout employee assistance line. We also offer a no charge to the employee ergonomics specialists will come out and help them if they're having any repetitive motion, repetitive use injuries, they're sore, they're stiff. They'll come out and watch them work and give them exercises to do and take care of them physically as well.
Thanks, and Ashley, thank you for that great question. We have maybe like 5 more questions I'd like to get to. We probably only have time for 2. I'm going to try to focus on some ones that we can maybe get to efficiently. And the first of those is from Kenny. And actually, I think, well, anybody can answer this. Have you had any experience providing new manager or supervisory training for Millennial or Gen Z workers? So one challenge I've witnessed are when new younger employees move into management roles and have early struggles, especially managing employees older than they are. So whether you had this experience or not, at least Karen and Ryan, you all yourselves have now probably managed or supervised people that are older than you. How do you integrate that experience? How do you think about that training wise?
I do, I am above definitely a wide variety of ages, but I think that it comes back to being authentic and being real and knowing that like people just want to be appreciated. It doesn't matter how old their boss is. It doesn't matter, and if it does, that might be a personal issue for that person. I think that they need to work through, but I think that you just keep showing up. That's what you have to do in these types of jobs, is you show up and you prove yourself and you treat everyone the same.
Yeah. Can I just respond to that for a second? I know I'm not on the panel, but I remember one job I had, my boss would never acknowledge us. I was working as a marketing person in a memory care, and I would acknowledge her and she thought I was, quote, her kissing up. And that was, I'm so glad things are different now. And she thought it was weak to need acknowledgement. And we can all know we're doing a good job, but acknowledgement and appreciation is everything.
Thank you. Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I was going to say, acknowledgement, recognition is something that we also like to do. It's actually number 2 on the Hertzberg 2-factor theory on employee intrinsic motivators. Is recognition is number 2 with that. And so anytime we have a good project that we got success on, we thank everybody who helped out with that. And, we celebrate people's longevity with the company, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, and we announce that at the company meetings. And we're trying to announce new hires to let them know, welcome them to the company as well, to help with that recognition. And then I forgot what the original question was. I apologize.
Yes, Bonnie reframed it well. The question specific to management coaching and training for someone that is going to be managing older generations that is from a younger generation.
Yeah, so our hierarchy, so to speak, actually encourages that communication, because we sort of have the inverse theory of that the supervisor is responsible for the outputs of their employee, not the employee is responsible for their output. So, our supervisors have weekly team building get-togethers. They try and talk individually, get to know their new team member, and if there's any sort of discommunication, what's going on, then if it's between cross collaborative, so without getting into our structure, if they're unclear about a goal, they go ask the supervisor. Or if there's just not an issue, we'll sit down with them and try and figure out the barriers of what's going on. And is it a communication piece? Is it just to try to figure out what's going on? And we have a really high resolution rate when it comes to that. Just sitting down and really, if somebody's complaining with the barrier, really sitting down and trying to figure out and solve it.
Excellent. I am going to ask one rapid fire question before they cut my mic off. Just to close us out here, I think Amber asked a really good question. I would just love if you have something that comes to the top of the mind, if you could say, if you've had any tools, processes, or platforms to implement that help you train, is there any programs that folks in the audience should be aware of, they can take advantage of?
You're saying training programs like that they can touch base with?
Yeah, could be anything. Could be a program, could be a philosophy.
Well, I mean, I think we're here. I mean, the chamber does a really good job. Like all these resources, right? I mean,
yeah, lean on your fellow businesses for sure.
And I think, I mean, something I've learned in my position is that even if you go to training, yes, they're great, but you're gonna learn the most from your peers and you networking and learning space, really, is my takeaway. We do a lot of training. Ours is more particular towards dental. They are broadening their horizons, but we use a company called the Scheduling Institute. But it is more towards a health field in how they run it. But I think what they teach can definitely benefit other types of businesses. So I can only speak more towards healthcare as far as like actual educational training. But I think we're in one right now. It's great.
Yeah, we have a lot of niche training things. So I would just say, whatever trainings you are doing, recognize that if it's not working, be able to recognize that and pivot away from it. Even if you've been doing something for 10 years, maybe have somebody come in with a fresh perspective and really listen to process improvements, even from day one employees. And just because you've been doing something for 10 years and you've been doing it this is the way we do it. It's always good to keep options open and really evaluate. I mean, we move stuff around all the time for policies and training programs, and even the physical layout of the plant. Somebody says, hey, what if we tried adjusting the flow this way? That's a good idea. We haven't tried that. So just being really open and receptive to feedback.
I think also one thing I had written in my notes too, and I think you touched on it with Microsoft Teams, but is communication for your team just as much as training. And we use Slack. It's an app and it's amazing. You can create multiple different channels and teams, and it's basically like making social media for your office within like having the availability to text or communicate with anyone that if you're not familiar with it. It is such a great resource as we've grown, because when I started, we were like 30 something employees and now we're pushing that 100 mark. So it was like, how do I, as a marketer, educate my team of all these different things that are going on? And so that is probably one of the best resources and takeaways as having to be an educator and communicator with a team.
Well, thank you so much to Karen, Mark, and Ryan. I really appreciate your feedback on this. I'm going to hand it back to Danny to close us up, but obviously we could be talking about this for days and days, if not the rest of our lives. So thanks so much for the panel for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Henry. This was amazing, and you did such a great job facilitating. We really appreciate you and your presentation and your insights. And thank you to our terrific panelists, like Henry said, and our presenting sponsor, US Bank. This was a wonderful program, lots of great questions. Continue to reach out to your chamber and Henry with questions you have too. We did record this program, so we'll send this out in the next week. Share it with your colleagues and anyone else you think might be interested. Thanks all for joining us today, and have a great weekend.